Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, Tulsa's source for great gardens, southwoodgardencenter.com, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Welcome to Oklahoma Gardening. On today's show, host Casey Hinches looks at some redbud trees for Oklahoma landscapes. Extension Wildlife Specialist Dwayne Elmore helps control some furry pests. Casey has tips for getting the most out of your crepe myrtles. And Barbara Brown prepares gnocchi with spinach and beans.
Love this time of year when our landscape is starting to get brush strokes of color across the plant material. Our trees are starting to turn various shades of green. Some are blooming white, but nothing says spring like our Oklahoma redbud. Cercis canadensis, or eastern redbud, is our state tree, and it typically gets to be about 20 to 25 feet tall, and it ranges across our state. Now the flower buds tend to be a little bit of a lighter pink color, but it's what you'll see on our native roadsides. Now this isn't to be confused with the Oklahoma cultivar, which is Cercis canadensis variety texensis. This was a particular cultivar that was identified in the Arbuckle Mountains in 1964 and is often seen more in the landscaped areas versus the native areas. This particular cultivar, Oklahoma, tends to be a little bit smaller, only getting to be about 18 to 20 feet tall. And it has more of a magenta flower to it and rich, glossy green leaves. Now, over the last decade, a lot of breeding has been going on with our beloved redbuds. And you can get them in white flowers, you can get them with maroon leaves, chartreuse leaves, and even weeping forms. But there's one that I want to show you that's making quite a display here in the Botanic Gardens today. This is the Avondale redbud. While it's not native, it was actually discovered in Avondale, New Zealand. You can see that it has the beautiful color to it. And what is so nice about this one is the profuse number of blooms that it has. But what I really like best about it is the multi-stem form that it creates. It will continue to bloom all the way down these trunks, and it literally looks like a vase of redbud branches that I'm standing next to, or almost like a fireworks show that's happening. You can see the bees love it this time of year as they're always looking for anything with pollen. And it's a great plant because it does get about 20 feet tall with about a 15-foot spread on it, and it is drought tolerant once it's established. Now, Avondale, although it's not native, if you're looking for that profuse color to last a little bit longer, this might be one you want to add to your landscape. We are here with Dr. Dwayne Elmore, and he is our Natural Resource Ecology and Management Specialist here at OSU Extension. And Dr. Elmore, you're going to talk to us about a few critters that we might be finding in our home and in our garden today. We're going to talk about the possum, the raccoon, and the skunk. Now, why are we talking about these three together?
Well, generally they can cause similar damage around the home, and sometimes people don't even know maybe what they're dealing with. They're just seeing a type of damage, and it could be one of those three, and we can control them with similar methods.
So what's some of the damage that we might be seeing?
So probably the more common complaints are I have an animal under my deck or under my house, or it's in my attic, or something's eating my cat's food at night, or something's getting in my trash cans at night.
Okay, so if we think we have one of these three and we're not sure, because they're all nocturnal, correct? And so
by and large,
we
yeah,
might not see them,
correct,
but we see the damage. What can we do about that?
Well, if it's an attic or under your house, those are easy, just exclusion. You know, seal the holes where they're getting in, and that'll be a permanent fix for that issue. If it's a trash can, use something really sturdy like a metal trash can, or really heavy plastic that has a bungee strap that the animals just can't open, and that should take care of that problem. If it's animal food that they're consuming, like, you know, you left cat food or dog food out overnight, just make sure you don't leave it out overnight. Just take up the food, whatever your pet didn't eat at the end of the day. And so if you do those things, most of the problems are going to go away.
Okay, and obviously you want to do that exclusion, you know, before you know they're in your home. You don't
Correct.
want to do it and trap them inside your home.
Correct.
But if that's not working, is there another alternative? I mean, can we trap these, and what is legal to do with these animals?
Yeah, good question. We can trap them, and there's different size traps. For skunk, for example, a trap that has maybe a 6 or 7 inch opening, like this one,
use this one
is appropriate. And for larger animals, opossums and raccoons, this larger 10 or 12 inch opening trap is ideal. And we want to bait that. You'll place the bait behind the pan here, and you can use sardines or tuna fish. That works just fine. You don't have to get real fancy with it. And generally, you'll catch the animal pretty quick. Raccoons, opossums, and skunks are all fairly easy to capture. So then once you capture, it's like, well, what do I do with it?
Right.
So legally, you cannot take that animal and release it on someone else's property unless you have permission from that landowner.
Okay.
So that's important to know. You can't just take it anywhere you want. You need permission.
Now, if it's your own land, can you take it further away on the North 40 or something
like that? You can,
Okay.
yes. And if you don't want to deal with it at all, you can call a nuisance wildlife control operator. They're licensed by the state, and you can go on the Wildlife Department's website and find a list of those by county.
Okay.
If you have a skunk, that's maybe something you want to call somebody to help you with. But if you want to deal with it yourself, often the skunks will be asleep in the trap, and you can walk up quietly and place a tarp or some heavy burlap over the trap and then move the trap. That doesn't mean that they won't spray, but if they do decide to spray, you should be more or less protected by the tarp.
Okay, all right. So can you trap throughout the year? Is there a certain season that we're supposed to do this?
You can kill skunks year-round.
Okay.
Legally. Raccoons and opossums are fur bearers, and you can only kill them during December, January, February, during the fur bearer season, and you would have to have a hunting license and a fur bearer license. Most homeowners probably are not going to have those things, so if you happen to trap a raccoon or opossum, probably the best thing to do would be to call one of those nuisance wildlife control operators, and they can help you with it.
Okay, well, one thing we have a lot of chickens, and so we'll get possums in our chicken coop. What can you do about that?
That is an exception to the rule. If the animal is causing livestock loss, and that would generally be poultry in the case of possum and raccoon, then you can kill that animal. Okay. So that's an exception to the rule about not being able to shoot them year-round.
Okay, so that is legal to do if they're in your poultry year-round.
Correct.
Okay.
And the most humane way, if you are going to kill that animal, is to shoot them. Certainly, drowning is very inhumane. Don't do that.
Okay. So a lot of times when we trap things, we put a trap out, it's got food in there. We might get something other than the pests that we're seeking.
Yeah.
What happens if we find another critter? Is there other things that are tempted to get into traps sometimes?
Yeah, especially with these larger size traps, you'll often catch a cat, someone's cat. So if it has identification, then you should call the homeowner or the cat's owner. And if it doesn't have identification, if you're in a city, call the animal control officer, because almost all cities require cats to be properly tagged and identified. So you'd call the city in that case. And yeah, you're probably going to catch a cat. And a lot of times actually the damage that people are seeing, especially if it's eating your pet's food at night, oftentimes that's actually what it's going to turn out to be, is a cat, not a raccoon. Okay. But regardless of what animal you're dealing with, I'd recommend wearing heavy gloves when you're handling the trap, just to prevent the animal from biting through the cage or scratching through the cage. Most of these traps have these metal plates where the handle is, and that's to protect you. And also, after the animal's out of the trap, spray the trap down with a bleach solution to disinfect it.
So a lot of times skunks might also do damage to our lawn, is that correct?
Yeah, sometimes they'll do shallow digging similar to armadillo. It's usually just a little conical, 2 or 3 inches deep, and there'll be lots of them in the turf. You know, if it's Bermuda turf that can close back in rapidly, it's not a big deal. If it's fescue turf, it can be a little more damaging. You can cut back on irrigation if that's an option. Often that'll help because the skunk is after grubs and earthworms that are close to the soil surface. But if that doesn't work, you can trap them with the same methods we described earlier.
Okay, and then I know with raccoons, one of their favorite things is sweet corn. So how do we protect our sweet corn?
So if it's a small patch of sweet corn, there are a couple options. The most expensive and the most foolproof is exclusion fencing. And of course raccoons can climb, so you can put a single strand of electric wire on the top of that to keep them from going in. That's quite pricey and that may not be an option. A simpler thing that you can do, it's not as foolproof but it can help, is when the ear is getting close to maturity and it's mostly filled out but maybe the sugar content's not quite high enough that you want to harvest it, go out with Teflon tape or a little black tape and just towards the end of the ear put a little piece of tape that makes it more difficult for that raccoon to pull the husk off. And that will lessen the amount of ears that they damage at least.
Thank you, Dr. Elmore, for all this great information. And for more information, you can go to this fact sheet. Many people often ask, when is the best time to prune your crepe myrtle? Well, when you're looking at pruning shrubs, there's something you need to find out first, and that's whether the shrub blooms on old wood or new wood. Behind us here, we have a plant that blooms on old wood. This is a forsythia, and now a lot of our early springtime blooming shrubs do bloom on old wood. And this, like quince and some of your hydrangeas, are examples of those shrubs that bloom on old wood. You can see here the flower buds were already developed last season, and that's why they're ready to go first thing in the spring before any leaves start coming out. If we had pruned this before it bloomed, we would be cutting off those flowers. The best time to prune a plant that blooms on old wood is right after it's done flowering. Now crepe myrtles, they bloom on new wood. You can see here in late winter, early spring that our crepe myrtle has not started coming out of dormancy yet. There are no flowers and no leaves, unlike some of our spring blooming shrubs. This one blooms a little later in the season, and as we stated, it does bloom on new wood. So what it's actually going to do is start producing some new shoots and some new leaves before it develops those flower buds. Now for shrubs that bloom on new wood, the best time to prune them is prior to their new growth. So right now is when we're going to take a look at this and start pruning it. And anytime you prune anything, you want to make sure that you remove any dead, diseased, or crossing and rubbing branches first. You can see here this crepe myrtle has quite a few stems coming up from the ground, and we're going to take a look at some of those. We want to make sure that we maintain an open vase-shaped canopy. They like a lot of good airflow, and this will help reduce any disease or fungus that might come in here as well. Now, here you can see a couple of branches that are crossing one another, and they're actually rubbing and bruising each other on the sides of them. So we're going to go ahead and take one of those out. Now, how do you determine which of the rubbing branches to remove? Well, again, looking at this, we're going to remove the one that is growing more towards the center of the canopy. This one is growing outward, and so that's the one that we're going to keep. We've got a nice sharp pair of loppers here, and we're going to try to get down as low as possible on that stem and remove that branch. A lot of times you'll have some of these lower branches that have been removed earlier, but you want to go ahead and take those down as much as possible too, because that just creates dead wood that might harbor potential diseases and insects. Now on this same branch that you can see where it was rubbing, We also have a dead stem here, so we're just going to take our pruners and go ahead and cut that out. You'll see we also have another little stem here, and this just is kind of going to be some weak growth. It's not really going to add anything. What we're looking for is a mature plant that's going to have these beautiful large stems, and so this one we're going to go ahead and take out as well. And you can see how that opens up the interior here a little bit more, again allowing for good airflow. So we're just going to continue this around the plant. Again, making sure that we are making the proper cuts. You don't ever want to step back and look and see that you've pruned one side too much and the other side is lopsided then. Now that we've pretty much finished pruning this one, you can see how it's got a nice vase shape to it. It's got an open interior to allow for good airflow. And you can see we took a little bit off, but not too much. You never want to prune more than 1/3 of the plant away. In this way, it still has plenty of vegetation once it starts coming out of dormancy to establish more growth. Now, this is not a mature plant just yet, so we'll need to continue to do this. And of course, if you ever see any suckers or small shoots starting to come from the roots, you want to make sure to trim those back as well, because we just want to maintain these trunks that are here now. Now behind us we have one more Crape Myrtle that's a little bit larger. You can see it's almost mature, and how beautiful this bark is starting to establish itself. As they get bigger, you're going to want to continue to prune these lower branches up so that you can keep that lifted and see the trunks below it. And the last thing a lot of people ask about are these dried seed heads that are from last season. Now, if they do bother you, because they will maintain there as the new growth is coming out, and they tend to make it look a little bit dried and dead looking. So what you can do is just get some leather gloves and easily strip them like that. But there's no reason to really go through and prune anything. It's more of an aesthetic thing. So here we have some that are much taller than what we can reach, and you'd have to get on a ladder. And so we're just going to leave them, and the vegetation will soon cover those dried seeds over. Now, if you're new to pruning, I have to say Crape Myrtles are a pretty good plant to start practicing on. You probably have seen some that have been what we call crepe murdered, where they've just been cut off with a chainsaw and those knuckles start to develop. And that's not the best way to prune a Crape Myrtle at all. In fact, what you're doing is slowly killing that Crape Myrtle. But as evident by some of the poor pruning jobs that are around, you can see that it's pretty difficult to kill a Crape Myrtle, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. But really, this is the best way to maintain that natural, healthy Crape Myrtle shape.
Today I'm making gnocchi with spinach and cannellini beans, and it's a fun title with lots of words that are fun to say, but it's actually very, very simple because we're going to use some convenience foods that you can get on the market or that you've prepared ahead. So I've got about a tablespoon of olive oil or canola oil heating in the pan, and then I have one shelf-stable package of gnocchi. Now this is the stuff you get over near the dry pasta. So it's easy to find, it maintains itself well on your shelf, and so you can have this on hand without having to go to a special place or a special time. What I want to do is cook this for a little bit. You're going to want to stir it fairly often. Non-stick pans are great for this one. If you don't have one, you should be okay. You may have to add a little bit more oil as you go. What's going to happen is that they're going to puff up just a little bit, and they're going to get a little bit brown. So we're going to leave them in here for somewhere between 5 to 7 minutes. Again, turning them over, stirring them around every little bit to make sure that one side doesn't get too dark, but we do want them all to puff up. Okay, we get these once that they've gotten plumped up and they've gotten a little bit brown. Again, that was 5 to 7 minutes. Then you're ready for the next step. These need to come out of the bowl. If you leave them in here or out of the pan and put them in a bowl and set them aside, if you leave them in here, they're just going to get soggy as we do other things. So we have the same skillet. I'm going to add about 1.5 teaspoons more olive oil. And then I'm going to add a cup of chopped onion, or 1 medium onion. And the amount of chop on this is totally dependent on how you like to see it. I like to see pieces of onion, so I chop mine fairly large. I have family members who don't want to know you put onion in there, so they would want theirs cut up a little bit more than that. So this you're going to just let it sweat out a little bit. We aren't really going for browning. We're going to let it cook for about 2 minutes, and at that point we're going to add some garlic to it, and then we're going to cover it and add some water to it and then cover it and let it cook for about 4 to 6 minutes so the onion actually has time to soften up. So we'll give this a little bit of time, then add garlic. Okay, I've got 4 cloves of garlic that I'm going to stir in here. I want this to cook with just with the onion, just briefly. We're going to cook the strength of the garlic flavor out, or the sharpness of it out, not the strength of it. We just want to get that gone before we continue. So I'm going to add half a cup of water to this. And now we're going to cover it and we're going to let it cook for about 4 minutes until the onion is really nice and soft. We don't want any crispness to it at all. You notice that it looks like it got a little bit brown. That was actually the bits that were on the bottom of the frying pan after we took the gnocchi out. About 4 minutes. All right. We still have some of that liquid there, and that's fine. What we're going to need that liquid for is we're now going to add some fresh spinach to it. So this is the one ingredient that you're going to have to find a source of when you're ready to make this dish. Now I'm going to try to stir in as much of this bowl as I possibly can. The recipe says 6 cups. If you can get 8 cups in here, if you've got a big enough skillet, all the better. Stir it around a little bit. This is going to wilt down, and you're going to just keep adding more to it. It's not a long cook, but there's plenty of liquid in here. If you had fresh spinach and you just washed it well, that's actually enough water left. So if your onion if the liquid has evaporated, that's fine. You'll have enough liquid if you've washed your spinach. I think we're going to not have any trouble at all getting this all in here, and I think I started with more like 8 cups than 6. Got a few more ingredients that I want to get in here, so I want to stir it around a little bit more. These last few leaves in there, and then we'll move forward. All right, the next thing that I want to put in here, since this is starting to wilt down just a little bit, is the cannellini beans, which these were canned. Make sure that you rinse them and drain them well again. And then I'm also going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. And then about 2 cups, pint if you've got it, or a can of diced tomatoes. And the convenience item here is I'm using the commercially canned ones that already have the seasoning in them. So they already have Italian seasoning in those, so they have oregano and basil already built in. If you don't get that kind, you can easily add those ingredients yourself off your spice rack. So if you have regular diced tomatoes, you're still good. All right, we're going to bring this back up to a simmer. And when that comes to a simmer, I'm listening and I'm hearing it going already, we're going to add a little bit of cheese to it. So I've got about 1/2 cup of mozzarella that's going in, and then also about 1/4 cup of Parmesan. And before I did that, I was supposed to add the gnocchi back to it, but we're going to stir it all together anyway, so we'll be fine. And this we're going to cover again and let it be just long enough for the cheese to melt. So about 3 minutes. That will also give it time for the gnocchi to reheat. And this is going to make a terrific main dish. So that's probably enough. About 3 minutes, melted cheese, and it's ready to eat. Okay, this is ready to go. As you can see, the cheese has gotten a little bit melty. The colors in this are just amazing. You have the gnocchi, the beans, the spinach, the tomatoes. There's a great sauce with it. And as I said, this makes a wonderful main dish meal. I hope you'll try this one. I can get the cheese in there. Gnocchi with spinach and cannellini beans. It's packed with nutrition and it's packed with flavor. For Oklahoma Gardening, I'm Barbara Brown.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week, Casey creates a planting of succulents to enjoy indoors or out. We examine woodpecker damage in trees and shrubs. Extension pesticide safety educator Charles Looper has the 411 on our garden pesticides, and Barbara Brown will have a tasty recipe. So join us then for more TV you'll grow to love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We wish to thank our generous underwriters, TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Garden Center, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society. We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.